Okay, so in this workshop we're hoping to just share some of our experiences of working with children as they transition into youth. So there's a team of 4 of us that are all going to share a little bit about what that has looked like for us, and see what you can discern that's right for your context. Because it's a really, really important age group, and historically the church has really struggled with this age group, with children as they move into teenage years, and increasingly churches are identifying that actually this is where they're losing children. And so churches are beginning to think a bit more intentionally about how can we engage those children and young people. And these are really significant years for our children. They're really, really important years. And so it's important that the church is there for them, that the church is supporting them, and then that becomes part of their faith. And I am the Centenary project manager. We employ youth and children's leaders across Sheffield Diocese, and increasingly the jobs that we're appointing to are youth, children and families. We used to just appoint to youth or to children, but increasingly they're jobs that are seeing children all the way through on that journey, because increasingly that is really important and churches are seeing the importance of that. So 3 different Centenary Project workers are going to share their experiences, what's worked for them, what they found helpful, and I hope that that's going to help you to think about what it might look like in your context. But first of all, it'd be good to look at a little bit of theory. So anybody think I'd talk to Hugh about this? I haven't, but rather fortunately I'm following on from what Hugh shared in his main talk. He was talking about Fowler's faith development theories. He got the book up and showed you, and he talked about how story is really important for primary age children. And that's right, and that's great. So as children move out of that primary age, what is it that's crucial for children in those years as they move on from being children to teenagers? This is what I'm going to read it out because I'm never going to remember this. So this is what he says about ordering faith, which is for 6 to 12-year-olds. The child becomes much more able to order their thoughts, and although imagination is still significant, these children can now distinguish between fact and fiction. Stories are still very important to this age group, but the sense of belonging becomes the most significant factor. These children are keen to join and belong. They take on the rules and the faith of the group. Their images of God are likely to be that of judge and king, the omnipotent controller. So that sense of belonging is the key thing that I want you to draw out from that. This is what Fowler's saying is really crucial for that age group of children and young people. They need to belong, and they will take on the faith of the group that they would belong with. So what an opportunity we have if we can engage those children at that age. We can really speak to them about our faith and help to move them on their faith journey. So that's what I want to talk to you about first. One of our workers in Rotherham, I was hoping was going to be able to share with you today, but she's not well. She was employed as a children's worker, and she was very much a children's worker running toddler groups. She did a fantastic job of that. It was great, loads of families coming to her toddler group, but she was finding that eventually the children were going off to school, as they do. They don't tend to stay being 3 forever. And she'd built relationships, and then she was losing them. So she started to put on festival days and events in holidays to draw in those families that she was losing contact with. She maintained that contact, and then a couple of years on from that, she was finding that actually some of them were actually getting to secondary school age, and they didn't want to come to her festival days anymore. So she's now set up a youth zone. So as a children's worker, who was running toddler group, she's now running a youth group and has 10 to 12 young people coming to every session. It's amazing. It's important to have that pathway. So that sense of belonging, where do the children feel they belong, and how can you maintain that sense of belonging for them? So this is not about us doing all the talking. What I want you to do now is talk to the person next to you and think about, what are the natural pathways in my church? Is there a pathway right the way through for children to journey in faith? Is there somewhere for them to connect that they can still keep journeying through? And if there's not, what could I do about it? So you've just got a few minutes to talk to somebody near you. Okay, if you want to finish off your conversations. Is there anything anybody feels that would be good to share with everybody else that they've talked about? Hopefully it's got you thinking, and that's the idea, to start you to think about, what does it look like in my context and what could I do about it? So keep thinking, don't go away from here and think and forget about it. Keep thinking. Are there any questions at this point that you would want to ask us? There will be more chance as time goes on to ask questions. I'm going to hand over to Dan now, who is going to help you to think about getting it right for that age group. So it's all right saying, no, it's probably more 9 to 13s I would think about, really. So I know that's what Fowler talks about in his faith development, but we're actually talking about year 5 to year 9 probably, I think, is what we're aiming, that's what this talk is aimed at. I hope that's helpful. So Dan's going to help you to think about how to make sure that the work that you do is relevant. Okay.
Cool. I'm going to try and precariously rest this on here. Sorry, that's not panicky at all. So, by way of context, most children who are going to make a commitment make it in this age bracket. So it's really important that we are engaging them in ministry, that we are providing as many opportunities to engage them with the gospel. Something else happens for children between the ages of 9 and 12. Something you might have heard before, a little thing called puberty. Yeah. Obviously a very dramatic change for children and young people to go through. But it does start from the ages of 9 to 12. Most children will have started puberty around that age group. Now, that is a journey, it's a process of becoming an adult. It's a process of becoming independent. If childhood is learning how to live, how to survive from our parents, adolescence and our teenage years is learning to do it independently. Learning how to survive, look after ourselves independently, to function as an individual. As a child, we're dependent on our parents completely, we look to them. But come 18 or whatever age it is, 27, depends on when you're going to kick the kids out. We have to learn through our teenage years how to look after ourselves and be a functioning adult without help. Some of us don't manage it and have to get married. But it's a time for kids to figure out how they fit into the world, and as teens get older, also kind of what impact they want to have on that world. Now, as a child, the main sphere of influence for them are their parents, or carers, or teachers, those who are in authority over them. A child will come to you with the thing they've drawn and say, hey, look at this. Is this good? Did I do a good job? Is this acceptable behaviour? They're looking to that authority figure to say, yes, that's right, well done. And that's why we as parents pin our children's artwork onto the fridge. We want to say, look, yes, you did a good job. We want to extol and build them up. Now, as children enter into adolescence and that transition, suddenly they're becoming more and more aware of the world around them. They're becoming more aware of others that will comment on their behaviour, others that will say what they think of what they're doing. And suddenly our influence as parents isn't the only one. And more as they become teenagers, it's also not always the most important one. There becomes this pronounced need to belong. not just as a child to a parent, but as a child to a wider social group. They want to fit in. So-and-so's got those trainers, I need to have those same trainers. She's got her ears pierced, I need to get my ears pierced. I need to share in that experience, I need to be able to fit in, I need to belong. And this desire to belong, it becomes a real driving force behind their behaviour. Now, who they build and develop relationships with, and the quality of those relationships, dictates the level of influence that person has. Through this transition, this period, relationship becomes the main sphere of influence, no longer authority. Just as an aside, if we as parents want to maintain a personal relationship with our children, that's something we need to be conscious of. We can't expect to have that same relationship with our children, that kind of authoritarian parent-child dynamic, and then be surprised when our children become teenagers why they suddenly don't talk to us. They're not looking for that authority, they're looking for a personal relationship. So we as parents need to make sure we're maintaining that as our children develop. Just something that came to me as I was thinking about this. But if you ask any youth worker what the key to good youth ministry is, they will say it is relationship. Fantastic. I didn't prime them on that. So we know working with young people at this age group, there's a profound need to build relationship and for them to belong. We need to have those two things to be able to effectively engage them. Now, I just want you to think for just a second and think, what is it you did during your lunch period at primary school? So that's between the ages of kind of 6 and 10. How were you spending your lunch period? Just you don't have to just share with anyone. Just think in your own head. Now, I used to do a lot of different things. I'd be playing games with my friends, playing make-believe, maybe playing football, a bit of kiss chase. In my case, a lot of kiss chase. But it's very imaginative play. It's lots of social interaction and playing and thinking imaginatively, there we go, and testing things out. Now think about how you spent your lunch periods during secondary school, high school. I spent most of my time just sat with friends talking. Kiss chase. Less of the chase and just more of the kissing, I think. Yeah. There is this real shift. Now, if we talk about age groups, there's some of that play, some of that running around that carries over into secondary school, year 7s, year 8s. But as children hit that year 9, it's definitely year 10, year 11, they are very much, we're just going to hang out and we're going to verse, and we're now doing this relationship thing. But if we know that puberty starts and that transition starts from anywhere from 9 to 12, you have a whole spectrum of children both wanting to run around, play games and doing imaginative things, and kids that want to just sit and talk and chill. So how does this affect the way we do ministry? How do we engage with these young people and make sure that we're scratching all those itches, both those I want to play, I want to explore, with I want to build relationship, I want to belong? That's going to be your question that you're going to now spend the next few minutes talking to the person next to you. I've got a few inputs I might give at the end if we don't kind of highlight them, but just think about, in your context, where are you already doing this? Where have you got that dynamic of play and relationship? How can you develop that further? And then once you've had a bit of a chat about what you are doing, think about what you need to change to expand on that, or what you need to kind of bring in that you aren't doing yet. So just a few minutes to talk to the person next to you. How do you engage with play and relationship building in your context? Okay. That was a nice long okay to bring everyone in together and give you time to finish what you're saying. And it's over now. So with that bearing all that in mind then, what are some of the things that we've realised or identified in our current ministries that are kind of covering that duality of play and relationship building? Things some people are already doing.
At our messy church, it's in a school, and some of the teenage siblings who used to come to the school now come and help out at the messy church.
Cool. So actually getting the older ones to come in and help and be that kind of the next kind of leading on and instructing. Fantastic. Real. Not enough. Not doing enough. Okay. Thank you for your honesty. Yeah.
We have a group that meet once a month but it's not religiously based. It's just sharing a meal and playing board games and card games, and it's really enjoying chatting and getting to know each other.
Fantastic.
So it's not a religious one. It's just literally a community.
Yeah.
That's trying to take the next steps forward.
Super. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, just spending time, just doing something. Often doing something over an activity can be a really good way into building that relationship and having those conversations. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It's meant that when we've stepped into the building, we've already got a small relationship to build on.
Yeah.
So we can now bring in the player aspect at a controlled time. So they're now quite happy to maybe do it a bit better.
Super.
Without any thoughts.
Yeah, as you've established that this is the model, and then you've been able to bring that in. That's really good. Cool. Anyone else? That's cool. Just for us to think. Just hands up if you're doing, would you say you are a children's minister or you do children's ministry? Okay. And hands up if you do youth ministry. Okay. Can I ask you, with the general agreement that your age group split is at that primary secondary split? Obviously we've just looked and we thought about the fact that there is a transitional period. There is not a definite split between year 6 and year 7 where this change happens. Now, I don't know about your experience, but my experience has been that if you have a split at that point, the kids at the older end of the primary ministry, the children's ministry, tend to get a little bit bored and a little bit kind of, oh, I don't want to be here, and they're not engaged as much. But you also get, at the start of the youth ministry, oh, those young kids are really young, they're really annoying, they're just mucking about all the time. Because there is this split over the age groups. Just something to think about, that maybe actually there needs to be a different age grouping or a different split. As an aside, having that stability and place of non-change through a time where there is a lot of change going on may be a real comfort to some of your young people. Particularly those maybe with special education needs, where there's just that stability of not another change, not another thing that's going to go wrong or is different. Just something to think about. And just to, as the youth leader in me is going to will wax lyrical about these all day long, but icebreakers. Icebreakers are a fantastic way of building relationship and playing, because they get everyone on the same level. When you do an icebreaker, just like we did this morning, we were all doing the same silly thing, and suddenly we all look silly, we're all at the same level, and now actually I can have the conversation with that person. They're not going to think I look silly because I've already seen them look silly. If you can do an icebreaker with a group, you automatically give that kind of level playing field of you can all talk now because we've all seen each other doing the same thing. You've shared in that same experience. You all belong. Also, it engages that play element of let's do something fun, let's do something imaginative or creative. Just to explore that. There are other ways of doing ministry to that age group, which I'm going to pass on to Helen to introduce.
Right, so hopefully Dan's giving you some key things there. Maybe think about changing your age brackets, and icebreakers are brilliant, brilliant things to use because they're game, they're fun, but yet they're relationship building. We talked about that pathway through, didn't we? About have you got that pathway through? And I could see a lot of people were horrified that they haven't. And it's not always possible to have that pathway through. But Heather just shared something which Dave was looking, oh, she's stealing my thunder now. Because that's what Dave's going to talk about now. Maybe your children in that transition age or your young people might actually be young leaders, having that might give them that sense of belonging, giving them a leadership role. So Dave's going to talk about his experience of working with young leaders.
Yeah, just to tag on to what Dan said, I remember going into year 7 and starting a new school, a new Sunday school class, and a new midweek group all at the same time. And it's a massive, lots of new people, and I don't get a drink and a biscuit anymore. All that sort of stuff. But yeah, as Helen said, I want us to think briefly about how do we create that pathway so that we don't have that sudden, I'm not a child anymore, I'm a youth, and I have to do this in this group that I couldn't do in that group. And so I'm going to touch a bit on the young leaders things. Whatever I'm about to say is just stuff that's worked for me. This is not me saying that this will work for you and you must try this and you must put my name at the bottom to say that I take the credit for it. But I'm going to offer a few suggestions to think about, and we're going to have a bit of a discussion. And the first one is messy church. So in my context, I'm now a youth and families worker, started originally as a youth worker, and took on the other stuff like Helen was saying, at the other side of Sheffield. And we run Messy Church. Now, whether you've run a Messy Church before or not, you will know the name, you will know the concept of what Messy Church is. And we had a group of 4 or 5 year 6s that were still at primary school, but they were really past sitting and doing a craft. And actually, they don't want to come with the family, because I don't want to be with mum. And they've got a younger brother who can't use a glue stick. And they just don't want that, but they still want to come to that group, and they want to keep that relationship that you've got with them, that the volunteers have got with them, and that their friends have got. So we looked at what we could do with them, because we didn't want to lose them. Originally, we started a Messy Church Extra, which was they took part in a little bit of Messy Church, and then we took them away and did something different. And that was great, but it just didn't work because they were then a new group, and they weren't keeping the Messy Church family element that we wanted to keep as a church. So we looked and we launched Messy Church Young Leaders. And that was an opportunity for them to still come along, to still do the craft if they wanted to, but they get a nice fancy badge to go with it, is basically the way that they saw it. But it was an opportunity for those that are at that age, because it, like Dan was saying, it is such a broad, there are some year 6s that do still want to sit and do a craft. And there's some year 10s that want to sit and do a craft. But there's also those that don't. So we paired our young leaders up with our volunteers. So we called them crafty ladies, because it was all our old ladies in church that ran different groups. And we paired them up. And each month they went with a different volunteer, and they helped do the craft. They helped the younger ones with their sticking. But at the same time, if they wanted, they could still do their craft and be part of it. And it gave them a real sense of ownership of the group. We didn't necessarily find them inviting friends along, so it was kind of what you've got at that age group you stick with. It's not necessarily you're growing the numbers of that age group at the time. But it gave them a real sense of ownership to be able to be, do you know what, I'm going to help you with your sticking, and I'm going to still be able to take one home and put it on my fridge. But without the whole, it's another kids group. Because Messy Church is very often, it's a family thing, but it's a kids thing. And you can take that as a positive or as a negative. It's a kids thing. There's other elements that you can do to your Messy Church to make it more, but that was one of the things that we found. But the thing that was different is I was just having a conversation with Lizzie, who I was sat with, rather than using them as a volunteer and running them into the ground like you would your volunteers, make it different. So what we did is our Messy Church was monthly, and on the alternate fortnight, we would meet just as young leaders. Just myself and another volunteer and our young leaders. And we'd look at the passage, we'd look at what are we going to be teaching at Messy Church, what songs do you think would fit with that, any craft suggestions, who are you going to pair up with, and all that sort of stuff. And it was an extra meeting where we would actually meet. We tried to meet in McDonald's, we met in McDonald's a couple of times, we met in the local supermarket cafe, we met in the church office, we'd have a milkshake, we'd have a bit of food, we'd have a chat, find out how life is, and then get down to some planning. Because we were very much about, we don't want to use them as a volunteer. We don't want them to not get anything out of it. But we also want to prove to them that they're still valuable, and they can, although they're in that middle stage, here's a new thing that you can do. And so we'd explore the passage together. We'd pull the key points out. Often we'd choose who's going to do the actions for the songs this month, who's going to sit on the register with one of our volunteers, and those sort of things. But it gave it an extra little thing that made it their own, because they were part of something bigger, which was the team of volunteers, and they were part of something bigger, which was Messy Church, but they had their own group in their own right. And most of these young leaders we had were church kids, but there was a couple of them that had just been to Messy Church over the years, and that was church to them. And it was actually, we were able to get so much more out of them on a discipleship point of view and from a spiritual point of view, because we were able to have those conversations that you can't have when you've got 30 kids in Messy Church, or however many kids you've got, because you'll stop eating glue and put the scissors down, and all that sort of, oh, by the way, Jesus loves you, that sort of quick flair while you're trying to do a Messy Church. But you were able to build those contacts with them on a separate scale and then bring them into something bigger. So that was something that we tried. It was only for a season, because they then got to the point where actually I'm too old to even do that. And that's okay. So what else can we do for them that keeps the contact with them, because they don't want to come to Messy Church anymore? At that age as well, parents' attitudes change a lot. You get some parents that still accompany their 14-year-old to everything, and you get others that, do you know what, you're at secondary school, stuff you, you're on your own. And Messy Church, we need to see the parents. So actually that's when that sort of season finished, and we brought in the next thing. So our Messy Church, for various reasons, we decided to close and replace with other things, and we kind of rebranded our ministry with children and young people. We already had a youth group that ran every week, and we kind of did things backwards. So in your churches, you probably would start with a kids group, and as they get older, you create the youth group. We did it back to front, because at that point we didn't have many children, but we had contacts with young people. So we started our youth group, and then in September last year we started our weekly kids group that runs on the same night. Don't recommend that to anyone. Children's group followed by youth group on the same night. Brave option. And we pulled our kids in from that. But we had some young leaders that we'd used previously, and some that we hadn't, that we'd built relationships with, and we wanted to see them develop. They're non-church kids at this point, so this is something from the other side. They're just secular kids that we built relationships through discipleship and mentoring in schools, through work in the community, all that sort of stuff. And so we launched, so our ministry is called Fresh, so we have Fresh Woodhouse, and then Fresh Youth, Fresh Kids, all that sort of stuff. And we created Fresh Young Leaders. And this is an opportunity for some of the young people in the youth group who we know, who we've identified as, do you know what, you'd be really good at helping us. There is the sideline that you would actually really be helping us. And some of my weekly kids activities I wouldn't be able to run if my young leaders didn't turn up. But an opportunity for them to be able to help. But this is very different, this example is because the midweek youth group and the midweek kids group, we have Bible input. It's light Bible input, so it's just, a thought of the week or a mini-series that we work through. And that's the extent of their Bible knowledge, and that's their extent of church. But by getting a few of them involved in the kids group that runs before, we're able to teach them far more, because they're hearing 2 Bible sessions a week rather than 1. But what we try and do with them is we work alongside them. So, do you know what? I'm running this game this week. Can you help me by bringing all the stuff into the middle of the room for me? And that's it that week. And then, do you remember that game we did a few weeks ago? Well, now that you know how it works, do you want to help? And I'm now at the stage where we've only had our young leaders from September to now. They could run a half-an-hour game session on their own, because we've been able to work alongside them and give them a little bit at a time. But the thing that goes with that is we want to have a mutual relationship. We don't want it to look like we're taking and taking and taking from them, because you're great at sports, I'm going to use you every week. What can we give back to them? So we have, like at the end of each term, we just go for a social with our young leaders. Sometimes the rest of the team come along and we go bowling, or something like that. But we also help them in practical ways that perhaps they're not getting. So my work is in quite a deprived community, with quite a high exclusion rate in schools. And so although they turn up to school and they turn up to do their exams, they leave school and go to college and they haven't got a clue what's going on. They want a part-time job and they don't even know what a CV is. So we offer things like that just on a side loan. We're able to give them references for college. So we're at college application time at the minute, and I've just written references for all of my young leaders for their college applications. We got given some funding for some work, and some of that was for training for volunteers. And we used some of that for training for our young leaders instead. Simple things like a $12.99 online food hygiene course goes miles for them to put on their CV. And by having the food hygiene, you can then use them for things that involve food hygiene as well. But, you know, it's a bit of give and take with them, you know. I really need your help, you know. You'd be doing me a massive favour, but what can we help you with? Continuing that relationship, but in a more mature way. So rather than, oh, can you go and fetch me them scissors? Thanks. Don't run with them. It's, do you know what? Why don't you help me run this activity? If you've got a free time over the next few weeks, can you think of a craft? I'm not asking you to buy the stuff, but can you think of something, bring it back to me, and we'll hash it out together. Making them learn that actually they've moved groups, but they are growing up, and they want to take on more responsibility. They want that lanyard. You know, they want that team top. They want to be called a volunteer. They want to hold a little 4-year-old's hand that's feeling really nervous when they come to a kids group for the first time. And they want to work alongside them. And my young leaders are amazing, but they're really good at the little one-to-one bits that when you're doing everything up front, you don't notice. So they'll sit with one child for the whole time on their first time. And to that kid, they're the best person in the world. And they're actually better than I could be, because to them, I'm a grumpy old man, you know, that's shouting, put that down, get off that pile of chairs. And so it's helping the younger ones realise that they've got someone to look up to that's realistic, and it's helping the old ones realise, do you know what, I'm doing something. I'm not sat in a corner cutting things out for this youth leader that needs an extra pair of hands. So I want you to have a discussion in your 2s and 3s, is I want you to think about who can you identify in your church that fits into that category. And when I say in your church, that can be in your midweek group, your Sundays, people from school that you have connections with. How can you identify people that fit into that category? And I want you to think, what are their natural gifts? What are their natural skills? What are they good at? What are they not good at? And how can you develop them? So just have a chat in your pairs for a few minutes about identifying people that fit into the category. What are their natural skills and how can you develop them? Okay. Has anyone got any comments or questions about that? Has anyone got any top tips on being able to develop certain skills that might be useful for the rest of us? No? Cool, that's okay. There's just one more thing that I want to touch on, and then I'm going to hand over to Hannah, who's going to explain that a bit more, and then a few other things. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this resource called It's Your Move. It's in a nice new fancy book. But that's one of the things that I've been able to do in my context in 2 primary schools, 2 classes per school. So that's about 140 kids or something like that. And we do that every summer. And the book is aimed at those that are transitioning from primary school to secondary school. And it has in it, scenarios that you're going to go through, both funny and serious. The old version used to look at the story of Joseph and how Joseph was in a foreign land where he didn't know anyone, and all the sort of things that could be similar to them. And that's quite a good resource for that age group, because although, like Dan was saying, developmentally we're at such different points, they're all starting as a new school. Whether they go in with all their class or whether they're going on their own. They're starting a new school. And it's a really good resource to be able to work through those transitions and those things that they're facing. And actually, most of them, if you take away the context of a new school, they're still relevant. A new group of friends or a new club that you join, or just that you're starting to feel a bit different. Those sort of things. So that's a resource. Downstairs on the bookstall, we brought the sign up. I'm going to do my best modelling. There you go. There's currently an offer on. So the books are usually £22.50 for a pack of 10. But at the minute, they're 14 quid. So, crack on with that.
You need to either go down and order those today or contact CLC. It's just for this month, that offer. So you need to order them during March. Get them at that time.
But it is an amazing resource. I've used it in my various roles over the years in various schools. They work on multiple scales, so you can do them as a class in the school. You can do it with a group of kids coming to church. I've done it with 2 classes put together in the hall, and you can do it on more of a one-to-one basis, which I'm going to hand over to Hannah, who's going to tell you a bit more about that.
Thanks.
So it's your move. I've not done it on a class or a school basis. I've done it on a one-to-one kind of mentoring basis, and with a much smaller group and going through it. And the new one, so it doesn't look at Joseph. I don't know how new these ones are, but I think it's this year. They use verses from Proverbs right the way through. So some of the things that they cover, they look at getting ready for a new start, so that moving on to secondary school, big questions you might have. They don't cover, will I get my head flushed down the bog? But they give you 40 tips of how to settle into school that are written by children who are slightly older. They think about how to pack your bags to school, what new resources might you need, how you're going to get to school, because for a lot of children it's suddenly a walk is now a bus ride. Finding your way around a school, because we all know secondary schools, even for us going into schools, it's really hard to find your way around sometimes. New subjects, so things like psychology, German, French, all those new subjects that you don't necessarily do at primary school. It looks at homework and what to expect, how to make new friends, and bullying. So that's all in this little book, and it comes with, inside it there's a survival journal. So memories of your primary school, so you start with that kind of thing, what were the highlights of primary school? But then also a part looking at new school, new you. So is going to a new school an opportunity to change something about yourself that you don't really like or you want to leave behind at primary school. So a new skill that you might want to learn, or a new, I don't know, something new that you want to take up. It talks about, are you ready for the move? What good things have happened? So since starting school, so a little bit later on, maybe after a term, since starting school, what good thing has happened to you since you began? So it's trying to get the positives out of something that can be quite a challenging time. And it looks at survival stories, so case studies of children who've moved to secondary school, because there's thousands that do it every year, and we all have to do it, but there's some really nice good stories of things that have happened, all interweaved with Proverbs verses. So it's a really good resource too. You could do it as a whole school, a whole class thing, or two classes together, but actually it's really nice doing it on a smaller scale, because you can have those deeper conversations one-on-one or with a smaller group. So our church, so I'm youth and families worker, but it kind of is all three really, all ages. We set up a group, it'll be 2 years this year, called Catalyst, and that was aimed at children who were 9 to 14. So we had Catalyst and we have Dynamite, which is 14 to 18, because that's just naturally the ages of the young people that were at church at that time. They've kind of grown up throughout. So we launched Catalyst thinking it'd be 9 to 14, so we'd get the younger, so the last 2 years of secondary school and the kind of newer secondary school. But actually, what happened last September was all the new year 7s kind of went up to secondary school, but then kind of turned their back on the group and didn't come back. Because suddenly you've gone from being a really big fish in a really small pond of a primary school to a really tiny fish in the big sea of secondary school. And actually thinking about it, so I know we spoke a little bit about how the developmental ages aren't necessarily stuck to primary and secondary school, but actually for our year 7s who left and those children, they didn't want to come back and hang around with the age like 9 to 10 who are still in primary. So that's just something to think about. So groups across all ages can work, but also they might not. But that just depends on your children. So this year we've decided that actually 9 to 14 wasn't going to work. We've still not got anyone over 11. So the group's going to be just 9 to 11. And then our Dynamite group, so the majority of those are going to university in summer, so we're going to change that group to be 11 to 18, and the one person who's not of university age is going to help with Catalyst, which is 9 to 11. So it will all change around this year. But that gives us a really good opportunity to really minister to those children who are going through puberty, going through getting ready to move up to secondary school. And actually we'll probably, maybe this year we'll give out these books and do it on a smaller scale, but next year we'll be able to do it on a bit of a bigger scale, I think. So that's just one example of, well, a resource to use, but also of our groups. Actually, what we had planned isn't necessarily what happened, but that's okay. We've just changed with them. So another resource that I want to talk to you about is the Archbishop of York's Young Leaders Award. Has anyone heard of it? Yeah, a few. So I'll introduce you to Archie. So there is a mascot. I mean, it's a little bit cheesy, but I do this with Key Stage 2, Year 5s. So this is Archie, and he's a mascot that takes us all the way through. So you can see I've done this for about 3 years. So this is all my resources in one. So this programme was developed by the Archbishop of York. It's based on the story of the Good Samaritan and Luke chapter 10 verse 27 about loving your neighbour as yourself. But if you're not in a Church of England setting or you've not got access to a school, you can kind of adapt the faith element as much as you want. So you don't necessarily have to include the Bible verses or the video of the Good Samaritan, but there are ways that you can talk about it, such as how can you be the change you want to see, and putting a positive spin on it rather than going really in with the faith input if your school won't allow it. So they do the Young Leaders Award for all the different key stages, but the one that we do is Key Stage 2, so Year 5. And the reason we do Year 5 is because they've still got a year left at primary school, so you would hope that you would see the impact of them doing the Young Leaders Award for their last year. But it also gives them a bit of responsibility, so they're still Year 5, they've not got SATs either, but it hopefully gives them that bit of responsibility of, oh, look at me, I'm a young leader, which some of the ones from last year are very much proud of that they've got, and they get a little badge when you've done it. So we've done this in 2 different formats. So when I first started doing it, it was weekly with a whole class. So a class of 32. Teacher would stay in the room, but probably be laminating or getting all those jobs done in the corner of the room, and I deliver the session. And the school actually used that as their RE input. So I went into them and said, hello, can I offer you this? And they're like, oh, actually, that runs perfectly alongside our RE curriculum for the term, the year. But we've also done it as an optional lunch club where the children choose to come. So it is hoped that they choose to come and they will behave angelically and really engage with it. That's not always the case, is it, Margaret? That's not always the case, but it's a really good opportunity as well that you can say to them, you've chosen to be here, and you don't have to do this. And kind of use it as a bit of a bargaining tool. But the fact that they've chosen to do it, they must feel a little bit of something to want to do it. So, do it with Year 5, mixed amount of people, so from a whole class of 32 to, at the moment, we've got 13 a week. It's made up of 6 sessions, and I've brought, probably shouldn't copy them because the school has to pay for it. So I have a few copies here, which you can't take, I'm afraid, but you can look at. And there are 6 sessions. But you can do it for as long or as little as you want. So we have done it over a whole year, and I've just added a little bit of extra input, such as extra icebreakers or extra things to think about or extra challenges, or we've done it for a term as well. So it looks at things like leadership skills. If you could change the world, what would you do? What are some good skills, some bad skills? We look at inspirational leaders. So what qualities have they got, the people we look up to? Why do we look up to them? Does their faith play a part? If you're allowed to talk about faith, does that play a part? Then we look at our local community, so our town, the town where the school is. What community hubs are there? What services are there out there? And how can we love our neighbours as ourselves? Is your community perfect? No. What can we do to make it better? And then we look at our national community. So we look at charities, so we focus on the food bank, because there's one in the village that we do the award in. And then we think about, does it cost to change the world? And we have some really good debates about that. It's really quite interesting, actually. And then they go away, they pick a charity and they research it and they present it back to the group. And then they think about how can they serve the community in their own little way. So then we compare what we just thought about then to globally. So we compare Rosington, which is where we're based, to Calcutta. So we do a bit of a case study. Think about what things do we want and what things do we need. So they come out with things like, I need Wi-Fi or I'm going to die, is what they say. Or, I can't live without my phone. And then we think about actually Calcutta, that the things they need and want are very different in there. And there's some games you can play. There's an activity where you make paper bags and then you work out how many rupees you get and how many rupees you need to live. So it's quite fun. And then we finish with a community action project. So we've done a talent show to raise money for a local girl who's got severe disabilities. We've done an obstacle course to raise funds for the NSPCC. We've done a food bank drive near Christmas, we've collected old toys, all kinds of things, and that's all come from them saying, oh, can we do this for my cousin, or I've heard about this in the village, or I've seen it on the telly. So they really own that. They write the letter to the head teachers and the governors saying, can we do this? They write the letters to the parents, they organise it all, I just help them make it happen. And then when they've done all that, they finish with an awards assembly or service, depending on what your setting is. And we've done it in the school hall, but we've also done it in church. We would invite key people, such as governors or local councillors, to come, and every child gets a certificate and a badge. And then they wear their little badge, and the hope is that then they would move into year 6 being young leaders, carrying that on throughout the rest of their school life. But it gives them a bit of confidence to think, oh, actually, I've done this, I'm a young leader. So there's a whole rafter of things that it helps them with. And that's just something for that age group where they're the older ones in primary school going to secondary school, which can be a bit daunting. It kind of give them a bit of extra, builds on the skills, but also they've done a community project, which is quite amazing. So we are fast running out of time, so just a couple of things to think about. Could this work in your context? Could you do It's Your Move with anyone? Or could you actually go to your PCC or church organisation and say, I really think we should buy this for those young people. We've not got the resources to study it with them or to go through it, but actually could we gift this to them? That's always an option. Is there a local school that you could do the Young Leaders Award with, or could you suggest it and say, I'll help? Or is there a local community project that children could get involved in? There's all kinds of different things to think about, but it is 3 o'clock, so we are out of time. But very quickly, has anyone got any questions for all of us? Kirsty?
How long do you spend working with a class?
With a class, Dave? One session?
Class time, I've not done it in one session. If the class are going to go in together, then you can always discuss something in half, usually an hour.
Yep. Just to mention, on the Archbishop of York's award, there is a cost. It's £10 per child. So if you have a class of 32, it is quite expensive. But again, is that something that your church might offer to help with, or is there a way around it? But there is a cost. If you are interested, though, I've got the packs here, and they've got a really good website. So, any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much.